7-9 each of the last 3 years. So are they actually going to go up? Are they going to go down? Or are they going to stay at 7-9? New Orleans Saints 2017 preview. Brendan Albert is here. I'm Adrian Fedke. It looks like the quality is a lot better than yesterday.
I mean, it really only could have gone up from yesterday. I feel bad for our Bucks listeners because honestly, we crushed it on the Bucks one, and really, the quality was just shitty. So our apologies, guys, about that.
Yeah, blame me. My laptop's broken. So now I'm using an iPad, and I'm on Kyle's account. Brendan is logged into the Better Birds. He had to start the show. But all right, let's get into the Saints talk. So, like I said, 7-9 each of the last 3 years. What are they going to be this year? What are they? Is that just what they are?
No, I actually think they're going to improve, but they're only going to improve to 8-8. Honestly, the division is just too darn tough. I mean, realistically, everyone else in the division has a lot, if not one, multiple defensive playmakers, and the Saints really don't have anything on defense that really makes me say, okay, they can at least turn the ball over enough for the offense to get a couple more reps. I mean, I think they're going to go 8-8, and I just don't see them being a team getting a wild card berth because of how darn hard that division is.
Yeah, and if you remember back to 2009, that's a great point about forcing turnovers. When they won a Super Bowl, that's what they did. They forced one turnover after another. And when you have a high prolific offense, I mean, I don't know if it's prolific anymore, but it's still up there. When you have an offense like that, that's the kind of defense you want. A defense that turns the ball over and gets your offense the ball right back. And the last couple of years, we have not seen that. We've seen this defense be historically bad under Rob Ryan. It was 27th in total defense last year, and that was an improvement. It almost felt like the '85 Bears.
Yeah, honestly, Adrian, I mean the Saints defense, their defensive backs is right there in the same mesh as the Eagles. So that really puts things in perspective of how bad that defensive unit is. And the shame of it all is you have a first ballot Hall of Fame quarterback on the other side of the field. So it's like, in some senses, I feel bad for Drew Brees, but at the same time, the Saints have done a really nice job at giving him weapons, protecting him up front, doing a nice job making sure offensively he has everything he ever could ask for, but the defense is just a giant letdown.
Yeah, man. I mean, they have tried everything the last couple years. They traded Jimmy Graham to try and improve their defense, and that didn't work. So we'll see. I mean, I like Marshawn Lattimore, best corner in the draft. I like some of their pieces, but are they really going to improve this year? I don't know. Like, I like Sheldon Rankins. He had 4 sacks in like 9 games last year. He's going to be really good for them. I thought Kenny Vaccaro was good for them last year. So they have some pieces, but overall, it's just not there yet. I mean, they're trending upwards. It's slow.
Yeah, you're 100% right there. We'll talk a little more position by position stuff because there is some things in New Orleans that isn't awful, but I don't think there's anything in New Orleans defensively that makes me say, yes, you can now make the jump and get back into that wild card, maybe even winning a division. They're just not really there. It's too much to ask, even of a Pro Bowl to a Hall of Fame level quarterback like Drew Brees to say, hey, we need you to go out there and get us 32 points every Sunday because that's the only way we're able to win. That's just too much to ask of any offense in the NFL.
Yeah, I'm with you. All right, another move made this offseason. We'll get into Brandon Cooks later, but Adrian Peterson, 32 years old, coming to New Orleans. Really curious to see how they handle the backfield and how they divvy up the snaps between he and Mark Ingram. So we'll see there.
Yeah, that was an interesting move to me, Adrian. Are you a fan of that?
I feel like it handcuffs Ingram, and I feel like Ingram hasn't been that bad the last couple of years. He was. It took him it took him a couple of years to get going, and then 2013ish when the Eagles game happened, that wild card game. That's when it really started to turn around for him, and it translated into the next season. And now you're bringing AP in here. It's okay. They drafted Alvin Kamara, correct, too? So they have
Yep.
him in the mix. It's like it's a crowded backfield. What can AP even do anymore? I don't know.
I don't know either. I mean, because here's the thing. When you look at Ingram's contract, he essentially is on a 1-1. I mean, with these 2 years left on his contract, but if New Orleans opts to get out of it this year, excuse me, they don't lose anything. So essentially, New Orleans can move on from him this offseason and not lose a dime. So that's why I'm interested to see, okay, well, how does bring in an AP? And then you went out and drafted a running back that a lot of people were really high on. So there's a lot of options there, which is always a nice thing, because I think back, years ago, when the Saints were really running and gunning with things, they had Pierre Thomas, they had Ingram, and then they had Darren Sproles, and they were able to make all that work. But at the same time, I'm not sure, because Ingram and AP are pretty similar. Obviously, AP has a much higher ceiling, but who knows if he's able to hit that ceiling again. And then Alvin Kamara, he's the guy that's supposed to be the receiver out of the backfield. So I'm not really sure how this all balances out in New Orleans. The one thing I will say, if there's any offensive mind in the NFL I trust Sean Payton to do it. So in New Orleans, I have more faith than anyone, but I'm a little worried about what this means for the future of Mark Ingram.
Yeah. There. All right, let's move on to quarterback. Drew Brees, 38 years old now, not getting any younger. So what do you think? What does he have left in the tank?
Well, what's interesting about Drew Brees is he's quietly on a contract year. We talked about this in one of our shows in the past. I think we talked about it with the Broncos show we did in the past. But Drew Brees is in a contract year. Now, I think New Orleans is one of those teams who they want Drew Brees to retire with him. So they'll throw money at him, and maybe, honestly, eventually they'll start throwing more money than he's worth. But I understand why they would. But if you're Drew Brees, I got to wonder this. Yes, they've done a great job at giving a good offensive line in front of them, giving him a nice stable of running backs, good situation at receivers. They've done a nice job there in New Orleans. But if he wanted to go on and go to Houston next year or go to Denver next year, doesn't that all of a sudden make both of those teams Super Bowl contenders right off the bat? So I'm a little curious to see, what is Drew Brees going to do? Does he want to retire there in New Orleans? He's been very vocal about how much he loves it there, and I get it. But at the same time, he might have a better opportunity to leave and go win a Super Bowl elsewhere.
Yeah. While I agree with you, I do think he is going to stay in New Orleans. I think that's just what it is. I mean, that's where his heart lies, and that's just the way it's going to be. But I'm curious to see how many years he has left, because the way he plays, it's not like he's a guy that needs arm strength. He wins with intelligence. He wins with leadership. He wins by knowing the intricacies of Sean Payton's complex offense. He wins with anticipation. So it's not about arm strength with him. So maybe he can last a couple more years than you might think.
You're right there, Adrian. He's definitely one of those guys who beats you by his mind more than just by his arm. Now, I do want to kind of correct myself. One thing I just looked up here. He's not necessarily on a contract year. He's got a 1 year out, similar to what similar to what Mark Ingram has here, in that the Saints have an option to move on from him this offseason and not lose a dime. I don't think the Saints would do it. But potentially, if Drew Brees is one of those guys, and he's earned the credit, he's earned the responsibility, that if he wants to go to management and say, hey, I would appreciate if you guys sought a trade for me, he's earned that respect. There's not many guys in the NFL, but he's earned that level of respect. As far as a capability of continuing on playing, look, when you put weapons around a guy like that, it's going to allow him to go a little further in his career, stretch it a little more. I mean, there's 3 guys in the NFL right now, and he's one of them, that are sure first ballot Hall of Famers. So we're in a really special age. He's no doubt the 3rd best quarterback in the NFL, in my opinion. And I think he'll still be a top 10 guy for the next 3 to 4 years, realistically.
I'm with you, and that's exactly where I got him. Number 3. So, and I have him over a 9. So 9 means elite of the elite. So he's up there still. I definitely agree there. All right, let's go to wide receivers. A move that the Saints made this offseason, trading Brandon Cooks to the Patriots for a first-round pick. They used that first-round pick on Ryan Ramczyk. Now, I would not have done this deal. I'm curious on your thoughts. Drew Brees not getting any younger. I would have let Cook stay in here. Keep the weapons intact. I mean, you would have had him, Michael Thomas, Willie Snead. That's a pretty dangerous trio. I would have kept them around.
I don't disagree with you. I mean, hindsight's 20/20 here, because obviously when we're looking at things and we're looking at one of the best left tackles in the NFL and Armstead being out till mid-season at this point, where Ryan
Yeah.
Ramczyk, he's going to slide in and instantly be the left tackle. And this, and the hindsight 2020 conversation, the Saints did the right thing. But I kind of agree with you. Personally, for me, I like the deal that was rumored more of it being Malcolm Butler for Brandon Cooks. I like that trade a little more because that addressed more of a concern that New Orleans had than just getting another pick. But I agree with you, Adrian. I don't love it, but at the same time, if the Saints said realistically, look, when your contract comes up, we're not going to re-sign you, I guess I understand why they said, hey, we're probably never going to get a better value trade for him than right now.
Yeah, I get it. I to the NFL at the same time. I mean, dude, for Malcolm Butler, I would have done that in a heartbeat. That was the trade to make, not the pick.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to that offensive line now. So you talked about Armstead. He's out for, 7-8 weeks, like you mentioned. So some of the other guys, some of the other pieces, they signed Larry Warford during the offseason. Warford was the guy that was, good his first 2-3 years in Detroit, has kind of tapered off a little bit. So we'll see if he can kind of pick it back up again in New Orleans. Andrews Pete, drafted him as a tackle. They've slid him into guard. He's been a little bit of a semi-bust per se, but maybe as a guard he'll fit in. So what do you think about the unit?
Well, when we look at the unit now, if things would have gone the way that the Saints really were hoping, you would have started the year with Armstead at left tackle. Then you had the guards at Warford, and then you have Pete, and then Unger at center, and then right tackle Ramczyk. That's a pretty darn good offensive line if that all would have worked out. Obviously, the loss of Armstead is massive. Quietly, he's a top 5 left tackle in the NFL. And the other thing I love about him is he's much younger than most of those elite level left tackles in the NFL. So that's a big blow. He's out till mid-season, so he is looking like he's going to be able to come back this year. But that's still a big blow when you have $1 million quarterback. The guard situation, you're right, Adrian. Pete has definitely struggled a little bit. He was a guy who, transitioned from being a tackle to a guard. And this interesting thing that surprised me was he moved to guard, and it wasn't because he was short. He's one of the tallest guards in the NFL, which surprises me a little bit. But for whatever reason, the Saints wanted to do it, and he's still there. Max Unger was actually the guy they traded to get in response from Jimmy Graham. And Max Unger is one of the more veteran and one of the better centers. I'd probably say he's a top 10 center in the NFL. I don't think necessarily he's an elite level guy, but he's still a very good center. And especially in the Sean Payton offense, there's so much check with me. There's so much get to the line, check, let's change things up. A veteran center is critical because he's going to get to the line, look at what the defense is showing him, and then change the protection with Drew. So even though maybe he isn't an elite level center, his mind makes him much more valuable to the Saints. Overall, a very good offensive line unit.
Yeah, I'm looking at my tackles right now. So I have Armstead at number 9. So I'll read off my top 10 for you. Joe Thomas at number 1, Tyron Smith at number 2, Trent Williams number 3, Andrew Whitworth number 4, David Bakhtiari number 5, Joe Staley number 6, Taylor Lewan number 7. I put Jack Conklin at number 8, Armstead at 9, and then I got Jason Peters rounding out the top 10.
I would probably, from your Joe Staley and down, I'd move all those guys down, and then I would slide up Armstead, then Lewan, and then Zach Conklin. Now, Conklin's a good example of just something I'm biased about. I will always put more value in left tackle than right tackle. I should say that. As long as he's a right-handed quarterback, I will always put more value in left tackle than right tackle. I'm just one of those people, I value the blind side more than the right tackle. Conklin is no doubt an unbelievable right tackle, but to me, the left tackle position is a little more valuable. So for me, I like Armstead more.
I completely agree. And looking at my rankings, I only have 4 right tackles in the top 20. So that would be correct in your notion. So there you go. And as for centers, Max Unger is number 9. So that kind of explains to you, he's good, not great, not elite, but he's solid. He's top 10. Yep. So that trade for Jimmy Graham, Max Unger, and they got Stephon Anthony is who they wound up drafting, the linebacker. So let's move on to the defense, and let's move on to the defensive line. So we talked about the defense to start the show, and a name that I haven't mentioned, Cameron Jordan.
Yeah.
He's so – I forgot about him.
Cameron Jordan is one of those quiet assassins in the NFL. He's consistently been a 7-sack guy in the NFL almost every year since he's been in. I think he did have one season of 10 sacks, but every year he's been 7-sack, quiet assassin, doing his job. He's a really, really good run defender, too, for a defensive end. He's a little thicker build. So when the Saints have kind of been a hybrid front, now they run a lot more 4-3 stuff, but I liked him a lot. I'm a big fan of Cameron Jordan. He's just not really well known. And then Sheldon Rankins, the guy we talked about earlier, Adrian, he was their draft pick last year out of Louisville, and he only played 9 games for a fractured leg, yet he still had 4 sacks. So he was productive, in his small sample size. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. They signed Alex Okafor, the defensive end from Arizona. He used to play for Texas. I mean, he's been just a starter in the NFL, bounced around, 4, maybe 6 sacks in the NFL. He's fine at the other defensive end spot, but really there's nothing here in the defensive line that really gets me excited unless Sheldon Rankins really shows that he can become a consistent interior force rush guy getting close to 7 sacks, in which case that puts him in rare breed like Gerald McCoy. But until he shows me that, it's not a really good defensive line group.
Yeah. I'll say this about Sheldon Rankins. He was the one defensive tackle last year before the draft that I was really, really high on. And I watched the Senior Bowl practices exclusively, and he dominated everything. Just consistently in the backfield, consistently beating guards, centers, whatever it was he was matched up with one-on-one. And we saw a little bit of that last year. In terms of Cameron Jordan, physical, great with his hands. And I have him behind Khalil Mack as the second best 4-3 defensive end. So maybe I'm crazy.
I think you're a little high there.
What's that?
I think you're a little high on there, but give me a moment. I'm going to think of a couple of guys that I probably would take ahead of him. Honestly, I would take Brandon Graham over him. Maybe I know a lot of Eagles fans really aren't high on Brandon Graham, which I'm not.
Actually, it's funny about Brandon Graham. You either love him or you hate him.
Yeah, that's fair.
I have him top 10. I have him at number 10.
Okay. Who else is in your top 10 there, Adrian? Because now I'm curious with your 4-3 DM.
I'll tell you what. I remember when I did the 4-3 defensive end rankings, the defensive ends are not as good as the 3-4 outside linebackers.
Agreed. Yep, I agree with that.
So you got Khalil Mack at number 1. I put Cameron Jordan at number 2. Michael Bennett at number 3. Cameron Wake 4. I put Ziggy Ansah at 5. Everson Griffin at 6. Olivier Vernon at 7. I put Calais Campbell at 8. I didn't know where to put him.
Yeah,
because he's going to be defensive end. And then I got Carlos Dunlap at number 9. And then Graham at 10.
Yeah, I think I'd probably put Jordan somewhere smack dab in the middle. I'm a bigger fan of Johnson. I'm a bigger fan of Graham. I think those guys are probably both ahead of him. Olivier Vernon, I think I'm a little lower on. I like Cameron Wake a lot too, but he's a guy who's older. So if I'm drafting, I'd probably draft a lot of those defensive ends ahead of him. But yeah, I mean, either way, Cameron Jordan, he's a quiet assassin. And honestly, the thing you got to give him credit for, he's been really successful for the fact that I don't think at any point in his career he's ever had a Pro Bowler on the defensive line with him. And he's been a Pro Bowler. I mean, when I look at things like, let's go with Johnson that we were talking about up there in Cincinnati. He plays with Geno Atkins. Olivier Vernon. He's had the opportunity to play with a lot of Pro Bowlers too. Same thing with Cameron Wake. He's played with Pro Bowlers. So Cameron Jordan, you don't really understand defensive line work until you watch a guy who plays on a bad defensive line and you watch the offensive line completely shade and shifts everything to him. And if he's still able to be consistent with 7 sacks, hats off to you, Cameron Jordan. You're very, very underrated.
Yeah, and it's a shame for them because Nick Fairley is not going to be able to play for them. Obviously,
the heart condition.
Yeah, so that's a big loss for them. Somebody else I wanted to talk about. Now he's listed here as a defensive end. This kid had a great rookie season, but he's been hurt ever since. I'm going to try to say his name. Hau'oli Kikaha. This dude was a monster his rookie season. I don't know if you remember this, but he's been hurt the last 2 years, and he basically hasn't played since. He's a guy that I'm going to be having my eye on this year, if he can stay healthy.
If I remember correctly, he's from Washington, I want to say. And if
he was a linebacker. He was a linebacker for them. I think you know what I'm talking about now.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, he was a guy. He came from. I'm pretty sure it's the same guy. He came from the University of Washington, and like you said, Adrian, he's a former linebacker. I'm gonna guess he's probably around 250, maybe 260 pounds tops, which is pretty darn light for a defensive end in the NFL. He has struggled to stay healthy. He had a good rookie year, but look, there's a lot of guys in the NFL who've had good rookie years, you know. So if you have him come back healthy and now he can fight with Alex Okafor, a guy who's been a vet in the NFL, never really wowed anyone, but has been a solid defensive end, that's not a bad situation to look into. But either way, neither of those guys are really a surefire fix to a bad defensive line group.
Yeah, I'm looking to see our lads right now to see where. See, all right, so our lads has him as a linebacker. Okay. Because he's a linebacker. He's not a D end. All right, so this magazine is wrong. Their depth chart is wrong. See, this is what happens when you don't have a laptop and you can't look at the depth charts online. Damn it! I fucked up. It's my fault.
In the 1930s here without proper internet, huh?
Yeah. I'm holding the Athlon Sports depth chart on my lap as I'm doing this show, and that's how I'm doing the preview. So Alohi Kikaha is still a linebacker, and I'm glad because he should be. The rest of your linebackers. All right, so oh god, they signed Manti Te'o.
They did sign Manti
Te'o. AJ Klein, Dannell Ellerbe, not much there. Stephon Anthony hasn't really shown it yet. So
Yeah, I mean, it's not a positive sign because Stephon Anthony was supposed to be that guy who was supposed to be that missile speed guy coming out of Clemson and just, nope, hasn't seen anything. You know, quietly, Craig Anderson had 115 tackles last year. Now, while that sounds good.
Robertson's underrated, yeah.
While that sounds good, the problem is if he's not making those tackles, it's probably a touchdown. So that's not really positive because someone had to make the tackles and he just was the best guy on the bad situation. I mean, honestly, the front seven, not a good situation to go into. This is one of those situations that if you are a fantasy nut like I am, just look for whatever running back you have is playing the Saints and play them because it's going to be a cakewalk up front. It's not a good situation. As you mentioned, Adrian, they brought in Manti Te'o. I mean, look, his rookie year he was good. Then he had back-to-back years where he wasn't able to stay healthy. So noticing a trend here in New Orleans, a lot of guys who have been a flash in the pan haven't been able to stay healthy. So again, how can any of us really say, oh, the Saints definitely have figured it out? All they did was add guys who have showed 1 out of every 3 years they've been successful. So I can't be excited about signing someone when I know there's only a 33% chance of success, realistically.
That's a good way to look at it right there. There you go. All right, so secondary situation. It looks better because they have Marshawn Lattimore now. This Delvin Breaux situation. All right, I should have looked into this more before I did the show. But he played with an injury last year. And they later found out that he was misdiagnosed. He played with like a fractured leg. They fired the team doctor. So Delvin Breaux, who had a great year 2 years ago, last year not as good, injured. But can you really say he was not as good? Because, hell, he was on a fucking fractured leg.
Yeah, that's kind of important, you know? you kind of need 2 of them. So, yeah, I can kind of give a guy a pass in that some situation. But when we're looking at the defensive backs group here for the Saints, when they got Lattimore there at 11, honestly, I was sitting at the draft, and I remember sitting next to my buddy Z, and I said, Z, if you're the Eagles and you know Lattimore has slid, don't fuck around. Go trade up right now and get Lattimore because he's sliding. And honestly, I really thought the Eagles were going to do that. I really did. I was like, Lattimore should have been a top 5 to 6 draft pick. So when he was there at 11, it was like found money for New Orleans. So New Orleans had a great value there. Honestly, besides O.J. Howard and, of course, Reuben Foster, Lattimore sliding was the biggest surprise to me in the first round. So great situation there for New Orleans. Got a future good corner. I mean, everything we have looked at, reviewed, everyone said, hey, he's the top corner. So great situation there for New Orleans. Now, when you look at the safeties now, Von Bell is coming in as his second year, another Ohio State guy. He had a pretty darn good rookie year. So he played pretty well as that free safety. Good. Now we just got to be consistent with it. Again, 1 year, nothing for me to say, hey, he's going to be a star, but moving in the right direction. Kenny Vaccaro, on the other hand, he's a strong safety. I have him and Eric Reed, guys that were drafted, I believe they were drafted in the same year too, are both those strong safeties who, look, they've shown they can do it. They have both shown they can be Pro Bowl level guys, but they've also had years where they've missed a ton of tackles and dipped. I like Kenny Vaccaro. I like Eric Reed. I think both of these guys are in the up and up. So I like what the New Orleans has there in their safeties and at least one of their corner situations.
Yeah, it's funny. Kenny Vaccaro bring up the 33% thing. He's a guy that's like good 2 every 3 years. So he's like 66%.
Yeah, and you know what? I think, to be fair, the Saints are acknowledge that, and that's why they drafted Marcus Williams, the safety out of Utah, in the second round. So, you know, they are investing in that defensive back group. No, again, it's one of those situations. The Eagles obviously are a similar spot. They've invested in the defensive back situation. The last couple of weeks have made some trades and things like that. So, you know, it's still not a good DB group by any means. But I think if things go in the right direction, in 3 years from now, could be looking at a very good defensive back group.
Yeah, and Dennis Allen is a defensive coordinator that will use a 3 safety at times, and he'll trot out Raphael Bush out there. And Bush is a guy that's pretty underrated for them as well, I think.
Well, yeah, I mean, now, look, they have Raphael Bush. It's a great name drop there, Adrian. So there's a third safety, and then if you add Williams, you're 4 deep at safety, which is good. The problem is you still haven't really solidified the corner spot. So personally, for me, I understood why the Saints drafted Marcus Williams in the second round. I would have doubled down and drafted another corner there, or gone something with a linebacker situation. But fair enough. I mean, the Saints did what they did. We'll see if it pays off for them because that DB group is bad.
Yeah. I'm looking through. P.J. Williams hasn't really shown anything. Sterling Moore is just like, meh. So those are your corners.
Yeah, I think it's one of those groups that, like, I can realistically say, again, hey, look, almost everyone there is in their first through third year. So there's a lot of upside here, but I'm not ready to say, hey, this is definitely a group moving forward. I look at a situation like Jalen Ramsey. He came in his first year, and it was like, done. All right, he's going to be a stud. Von Bell came in his first year. He's looked good, but I'm not ready to call him a stud.
Yeah, Jalen Ramsey, I already have him ranked in the top 15 at cornerback. Like, I have him at 12 already. He's that good already. So, yeah, I'm with you. All right, so it's time for hot seat, overrated, underrated, all that good stuff. So who's on the hot seat in New Orleans?
I mean, I'd have to say Mark Ingram. I mean, anytime you are one of the all-time leading rushers for your team, and yet your team brings in a first ballot Hall of Famer and AP and then drafts a running back, your seat's got to get hot, right?
Is Sean Payton on the hot seat? I would not get rid of him. But no, I know there's
neither
the last couple of years. I think he's a great coach.
I look at it this way, all right? Jason Garrett should have been on the hot seats for several years, and the Cowboys let it ride with him, and things eventually got better with the roster, so in turn he became better. I think that's the same spot here with Sean Payton. I think guys like Sean Payton and Jim Harbaugh are those guys who they've won Super Bowls, so they're going to get a little more slack than they deserve. Now, that said, I think if in 2 seasons from now, so not this year, but also next offseason, if we are still looking at a 7-9 team in New Orleans, then I think you can start to say, okay, it might be time for us to move on.
Yeah, that's a great point, though, you make about Jason Garrett. That's pretty spot on right there. All right, who's underrated?
For me, it's going to be Cameron Jordan. I mean, I don't think a lot of people realize just how productive he is. He's never been, and I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who's going to lead the league in sacks. I just don't think that that's necessarily him. However, he's a grinder. I mean, he is just the definition of consistency as far as 7 sacks. And as you said it great, Adrian, he's physical, and he's really good with his hands at the point of attack and the run game too. I'm a big Cam Jordan fan.
All right, so you'll need Cam Jordan. I'll go Teron Armstead. I'll go the left tackle. I will say that he is probably the most athletic tackle in the league. I'm trying to think of one that's more athletic, and I got nothing. I know Lane Johnson's very athletic, but Teron Armstead is a freak. I know Jason Spriggs. They talked about his athleticism last year at the combine, but Teron Armstead, what he can do is tremendous.
I might still go Tyron Smith from Dallas. I think if we're doing
that one, he's more athletic. You're correct.
I mean, if we're doing an underwear Olympics for the offensive line, for what little that matters, I mean, he's in there too. But yeah, all three of those guys, I'd agree, are super, super athletic left tackles.
Yeah, Tyron Smith. Yeah, there you go, right there. All right, fantasy guy.
Avoid the running backs. Honestly, for me, I'm avoiding it. That's kind of my fantasy tip because, it's one thing to get a handcuff, in fantasy football. A good example here is if you're someone who can go out and draft Ezekiel Elliott knowing he's got a suspension, you can probably still get McFadden in like the 13th, 14th round, and your handcuff is still good there. Because obviously, hey, McFadden's going to be your RB1 while Zeke is gone. But realistically, in New Orleans, Ingram and AP, they're going to get drafted. Maybe Ingram's one round ahead of him, maybe two. And then Kamara, he's the unknown. He's probably going to go undrafted, but realistically, it's not a farce that he doesn't steal some opportunities from those guys. So my fantasy tip with the Saints, avoid the running backs like the plague.
Yeah. You know who we forgot to talk about? Michael Thomas. We kind of forgot to talk about him a little bit, so we'll just talk about him briefly.
Well, Michael Thomas is interested because here's the thing. For years, Sean Payton and Drew Brees have never really locked in on one receiver. Meaning maybe you obviously can include Jimmy Graham was that one guy, but even before him, they didn't really lock in on Colston when he was at his highest. Now,
yeah,
they spread it around. I mean, they've always been a very balanced team. And then all of a sudden, Thomas comes in his rookie year, 90 receptions plus as a rookie. I think here's the thing. Realistically, Michael Thomas is going to have a drop-off this year. Just accept that. He's not going to get better. I don't think he's even going to put close to the same numbers up. So I think for him, he's probably going to come back down to earth, probably closer to 80 receptions, probably closer to 6 touchdowns.
It was similar kind of rookie impact to Marcus Colston. Obviously, remember him. And he kind of reminds me a little bit of him in terms of he's 6'3", he's got the body control, and he kind of just knows how to get open. So I think they're similar players. So there you go. But drop off, I do expect it. And I do remember, I put him at number 21 in my wide receiver rankings, but I remember him very clearly not knowing where to put him because I just had no idea.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's hard. When you play with a Hall of Fame quarterback, I think the same thing about Tyrell Williams there from the Chargers. I don't know where he is.
Yeah,
You're playing with an elite quarterback who wants to sling it down the field. That defines Breeze and it defines Rivers. So it makes it really difficult to kind of say, hey, how talented are these guys versus you get to play with one of the best quarterbacks of all time. I think maybe you're a little low on Michael Thomas. I think he's probably closer to 15 to 20. But like I said, he's going to drop down to earth. Fantasy-wise, is he still going to be a wide receiver one? Yeah, probably. But he's not going to put those same numbers up.
You want me to quickly 20?
Sure.
Alshon Jeffrey, Jarvis Landry, Doug Baldwin, T.Y. Hilton, Demaryius Thomas, Larry Fitzgerald, Brandon Cooks, Allen Robinson, Julian Edelman, Emmanuel Sanders, Keenan Allen.
I'll take Thomas over Keenan Allen, and I'll take him over well, you just mentioned him there in Denver.
Demaryius Thomas.
No, not Demaryius Thomas. Emmanuel Sanders.
Sanders. Okay.
Yeah.
And they're right there at 19 and 20. So that's like the same spot where Thomas is. So there you go. All right. So I kind of have him in the spot then.
Yeah.
About there. Okay. All right. So that's it. That's the Saints. We're done the Saints. We're going to do the Bears next. We're going to survive on my iPad, and we're living in 1993. So that's Brennan Albert. I'm Adrian Fedke. We're out.
Who
You're going to have to hit stop. You're going to have to hit stop.
I will. Who dey, guys? Who going to beat them Saints? Probably 18 in the NFL.